Now, without any further ado, and to honor those who have joined us on time and even before time, I think this is a good place to start with the webinar. I want to introduce myself. I am Ankita Parashar. I'm part of the Horizons program in the Office of High School Programs at Ashoka University. And with me today presenting would be Paritosh. Paritosh is also looking at the Horizons program and is part of the Office of High School Programs. And also joining us today are a few very interesting people. These are student representatives from diverse streams at Ashoka University. So these are students who've gone through the rigor of admission, who've managed to find an opportunity to pursue the course of their choice. And they would be the best people to tell you, especially the high school students in attendance today, about what kind of preparation you need to do before and what is it that you need to be practically prepared for in your college life. So I'll hand it over to Paritosh. Paritosh, let's get the show on the road.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ankita. And everyone, thank you so much for coming. The panelists, Aditya, Shohan, Siddharth, Samira, Sanjana, if you guys could put your cameras on, that would be great. Take your time if you need a couple of minutes to do that. So before we move on, I just want to firstly, set the kind of agenda for the discussion today. First, I'm going to introduce you to what the Horizons program is. It's essentially a series of online courses for high school students that are different from any other online course in that they're live discussion-based courses. We're offering these courses on the weekends in May and June. This time we're offering 11 courses across a wide range of subjects. They're all 16-hour courses, so 4 hours on each weekend for 4 weekends, 2 hours on Saturdays, 2 hours on Sundays. And I'm just going to list the main general areas of each of these courses so you have a sense of the wide range that we will be offering. Environment and sustainability, international relations, astrophysics, entrepreneurship and business, economics, data science, psychology, biosciences, writing and communication, critical thinking, and filmmaking. So if any of these are of general interest to you, you should check out the Horizons courses. But we wanted to have this discussion not so much about the specific courses themselves, but about the general problem that we're trying to solve with Horizons. And I think the way that we see the problem is that the expectations from college level study of any of these subjects is very different from the expectations of high school level study of any of these subjects. So out here we have 5 great undergraduates from different fields, and we're going to talk about what college level studies is like in many of these different subjects. And we're going to contrast that to what it's like in high school subjects. So we explore what these gaps really are. So you can see then whether the Horizons courses in each of these different subjects would be useful for you. Also wanted to let you all know that this is the first of a series of 3 webinars that we are going to be having on Horizons. Out here, we're going to be working with undergraduate students, as I've said before, to explore what the nature of these gaps are, what is the type of problem that we could be solving for you with Horizons, and we've designed Horizons to solve. The second webinar, which is going to be happening pretty much around the same time on Saturday next week, is going to be with 2 or 3 college counselors and 2 or 3 alumni of our previous Horizons courses, which we ran in December, January 2023, 2024. And in that discussion, we're going to talk about how you can build your college application profile from the standpoint of the college counselors. The alumni are going to speak a little bit about their experience in the Horizons courses and how it has helped them with their college applications, which they're currently in the process of completing. And finally, 2 weeks from now on Saturday, most likely Saturday, 11 a.m., we haven't discussed the date yet, we're going to have an even more concrete discussion on what the upcoming Horizons courses will look like, because I didn't mention this earlier, but each of the Horizons courses will be taught by a main faculty member who is an extremely advanced expert in their field, but they're also going to be supported by a teaching fellow, which is an advanced master's or PhD student for the most part, to assist with the operations and teaching of the course. So we've got some of the teaching fellows of our upcoming courses that are going to be on a panel, and we're going to talk specifically about the topics we'll cover in the courses to come. So with that, let's get straight into discussion. I'm extremely excited about this. We've had really rich discussions, all 5 of us, and let's get into it. So let's start by talking about critical thinking. Critical thinking is something that we associate with sort of jumping into for the first time almost when we come to college. But there's always, I mean, I've always found it a bit difficult to understand what it is. Is it just a good type of thinking, or is it a different type of thinking? We're also offering a course in critical thinking, by the way. So, Aditya, could you tell us a little bit about, firstly, your background? Which school you came from, which city you're from, which board you did, the subjects you studied at Ashoka, and then you can begin to talk about critical thinking.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Aditya. I'm a third year physics major, philosophy minor here at Ashoka. I am originally from Pune. I've studied all school and high school in Pune. And yeah, I was also a JEE kid. And then I chose to come to Ashoka later. And yeah, I do physics. I'm majoring in physics, philosophy as a minor, and I also play like some music. I play tabla as well. So those are the kinds of things that I do here at Ashoka. Okay, so I think you asked me about like critical thinking, right? So um, it's sort of, in a sense, I think of critical thinking as a toolkit. It's very much similar in the sense of to math, which is that you can just build a tool that you have, and then you can sort of hone it again and again, the skill, and then you can use it on apply. You can use it to apply at any life situation that you have. So it's like as said in the course outline as well. It's important in any field. It's very transferable. But what is it really? And if you were to critically think about critical thinking, then a lot of it is about breaking down, say, complex ideas into like the world just hands out to you, in many instances of life, and into simpler parts that you can digest and comprehend, and really think about, sort of evaluate what you are learning, and then sort of trying to put them back together again. It involves some sort of comprehension, then some analysis, and then some communication as well. The art of communicating well also sort of, I think, falls under critical thinking and writing, which I think we'll talk about as well in the course of the webinar. So yeah, it involves sort of asking questions, understanding how to ask the correct kinds of questions that take the discourse forward and add to the discussion, bring something more to the table. So yeah, and another sort of thing that I can think of is challenging. So all of us have a lot of beliefs. Some of them we haven't evaluated very critically. So by doing such kind of a thing and learning about academically what critical thinking is, we can use that and apply it to some of our existing beliefs and see if they're worth having or not, or if they're worth changing. So all of these things are sort of overview covered in critical thinking, and of course there's many things. There's skepticism as well. Yeah, so that is probably what I would say as the basis of what critical thinking is to me, at least.
That's perfect. One thing that you mentioned was kind of reevaluating your own beliefs. Any of you guys, can you all say a few words about how you have reevaluated your own beliefs through college? Could just be a few sentences.
I think I can take that up.
Yeah, so but before you speak, just tell us, your major, where you're from, and which board and school you did.
Hi everyone, I'm Siddharth Chandak. I'm a second year EcoFin student minoring in entrepreneurship. I'm a hardcore CBSE student coming from Bangalore. And one thing that Ashoka really exposed me to in terms of critical thinking is the first place I got the hint of it was my EVS foundational course in the first place that all students are required to do here. Um, being a person who's very oriented towards being in nature and things like that, I always wanted to, uh, learn something about the entire climate crisis going on and stuff like that. But what Ashoka exposed me to was a more social thinking on this entire topic and how we as individuals can change our thinking about the climate crisis as a whole. So, like one example that comes to my head is how we measure, we learned about how we measure development in itself, and how if our measure of economic development is greater GDP necessarily just means more production, and more production has to involve, more pollution. So in that term, changing the measure of what economic development even means from GDP to something else, uh, like really brought about a change in thinking, and that's where I felt critical thinking, or what you would say second order thinking, that would go beyond the surface, actually came into play, and I could start applying that to like different parts of like my other courses as well.
No, that's really great. I mean, you're essentially saying that earlier maybe you kind of were interested in issues of environment from the standpoint of a nature lover, and then you came to a point where you were able to see that what really needs to be done is that we have to have a fundamental shift in what we're even prioritizing as a goal. So I think that's a great example, and it shows how critical thinking can be applied in different fields. Just wanted to I mean, Aditya mentioned this as well. So critical thinking is something, by the way, for everyone who's attending, that every single student at Ashoka University has to take in their first year before they move on with any major that they might have. We are offering a course on critical thinking as part of the Horizons program as well for high schoolers. And there really isn't any high schooler that I can think of who might not benefit from a course like this. Because especially, if you're unsure about what you want to do in the future, this is a great place to dive into that further. If there's an issue that you're interested in, but you might not get to explore in some of the other Horizons courses because it's simply not in the subject that you're related to the issue of your interest. Like, let's say you're interested in I don't know, like chemicals or something. We don't have a chemistry course. You can explore that issue in the critical thinking course because you're going to come up with your own topics and go through that. Aditya, can you say a little bit about you touched on this as well, but I want to ask you a little bit about like good thinking and good writing. The critical thinking course that we're offering is also a very writing heavy course. The person who's offering it is not only the person who teaches the critical thinking course to every undergraduate now at Ashoka in their first year, but also the head of the academic writing program. So what is the relation between critical thinking and academic writing, Aditya?
Yeah, so this reminds me of, so there's this favorite writer that I have called Paul Graham. He writes a lot of interesting blogs. And I remember reading one of his things on like the relationship between thinking and writing. Um, and so, so just to take an example, we have some of these science fiction stories where, in the future, some sort of, the information transfer mechanism has been updated, like reading and writing has been gotten rid of, and you just sort of mentally transfer like electrical signals onto people's brains, and that's how people learn to think. And there's a fundamental problem in that because of the relation between I feel there's a fundamental problem in that because of the relation between critical thinking and writing and reading, all three aspects. Because say a good writer, I think, just doesn't think and then write down his thoughts as a transcript. There is a thinking that is done while writing, and there's a thinking that is done only when you're writing something, because the very act of putting your thoughts into words and articulating them, in fact, sort of helps you like get better thoughts, and be more precise and articulate in what you've talked, writing about, speaking about, all of those things, especially writing. So in that sense, I think most kinds of thinking goes hand in hand with writing. So writing well helps you think well, and then thinking well also helps you writing well, in writing well. So sort of that is the relation that I see in between writing and thinking, that I think is really fundamental to both of these things.
No, that's really, really well said.
Yeah.
So now you know how people might think that writing is something that only has to do with. Actually, you know what? Before going into that, let me say one thing. Aditya, you spoke a lot about practice as a means of thinking, right? Like the practice of writing. Um, for everyone who's attending, this is the structure of the Horizons courses. In the Horizons courses on Saturdays, we mostly introduce the theoretical concepts that the week is going to be about. So kind of like the first thing that Aditya said about like what critical thinking is or something like that. And in the second session on the weekend, which is going to be on Sunday, is going to be a lot more hands-on. So the practical element will really come in there. So we've also arranged the Horizons courses where you're constantly moving between theory and practice over each weekend for 4 weekends. That said, Aditya, I want to come back to what you said about how thinking and writing go hand in hand. And you said actually, it's interestingly that most good forms of thinking and writing go hand in hand. One may think that writing is only important in subjects where you're writing essays. but that's not true, like based on the conversations I've had with all of you. So I'm going to turn it over to Sanjana now. Please introduce yourself, introduce your major, school you went to, board, city you're from, and tell us about how writing features in the work that you do.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm Sanjana. I'm from Kolkata, and I went to the BSS school, and it was a state board school. It was a West Bengal board school. So, of course, transitioning to Ashoka, there were a lot of things that were new, especially in my first year when I was taking foundation courses, things that I wasn't exposed to in my high school at all. So, coming back to Paritosh's question, I'd like to talk about what Aditya mentioned, belief. So, when we talk about critical thinking in the sciences, we know that science hardly cares about beliefs. It cares a lot more about facts and how you structured your argument and you prove it. So when you are doing scientific writing, that becomes very important. How you can separate facts from beliefs and how you prove the facts, and that it has to be done in a very systematic manner. Also, just communicating science to other people to make other people understand. So ongoing research in science, like present research in science, it's pretty advanced. So unless you communicate it with other people, like uh, even if you're not talking about science communication per se, just communicating it to other researchers becomes very important in terms of collaborations, or when you're teaching classes or you're taking classes at the undergraduate level. So that is one thing. And also, if we talk about science communication, that also is something that's upcoming, and a lot of people are interested in that. At times you watch videos on YouTube online, and these people like PBS Spacetime, Veritasium, these people are great science communicators, and just the process of writing that script involves a lot of critical thinking. And because say you come across a very interesting paper, just reading that and understanding, you might think that you have an idea. At times you think that you have an idea, and you do have an idea, but once you start writing about it, say you're writing a script for a YouTube video, or you're talking to a friend about it, or just writing a blog post, then you realize the gaps, as Aditya also mentioned, but you realize the gaps in your thinking, and you start thinking about it more because you have started writing about it. So critical thinking becomes very important in the sciences as well. And that's why, as Paritosh mentioned, that even if you are interested in a particular subject and you don't have a Horizons course for that, critical thinking is something that's going to help you irrespective of your major. And that is why it is a mandatory course at Ashoka in your first year. And I'm also a physics major. And I have to agree that the critical thinking course has helped me even to think in my science courses, although you might think that it's not very directly related and you are writing essays. But just the practice of thinking, how to think, how to question beliefs, how to, make your uh, how to make your arguments clear, that practice becomes very essential irrespective of your major.
No, that's great, Sanjana. Thank you. And we're going to get into this a little bit more over the course of the conversation today, but we are offering a course in astrophysics by a very, very special instructor. So we're going to save that for a little bit later and just talk a little bit more about critical thinking and writing in relation to a couple of more disciplines. Shohan, could you tell us, after introducing yourself as everyone else has done, how does critical thinking show up in your field? And maybe I can phrase the question a little bit differently, like, what is particularly challenging about your field, and what kind of critical thinking or good thinking is involved in doing the work of your field well?
So hi, I'm Shohan. I'm from Bhubaneswar, and like Siddharth, I'm also like fully integrated from CBSE. I'm from Sai International School in Bhubaneswar only. Um, so I'm an IR thesis student right now, and I graduated with a political science major. I'm a fourth year here
Sorry,
at
sorry,
Ashoka.
Shohan, just 1 second. You said IR something. I didn't. Can you say the full form?
I'm international relations thesis student in my fourth year right now, though I graduated with a major in political science. So when Paritosh mentioned that what's the value of critical thinking in my discipline, I'm just going to assume it's international relations. International relations, at least in the contemporary sense, encompasses a multidiscipline setting, right? Though in classically, when you are taught international relations in high school, you would be thinking that it's all about diplomacy, political science, how essentially how a state works. But um, in the real sense, it's more complicated as it encompasses now international trade, commerce, and even degrees of science and technology. Because interactions between states is something that encompasses literally everything out there. So when you are thinking about a multidiscipline approach, any arguments that you make, like the critical thinking, will essentially help you gain different perspectives on every outcome. So IR can be seen as the intersection of many subjects and students from different majors. I have a lot of friends who might be doing physics or even philosophy who are doing minors in IR. So you can come from any perspective, any background, and have a different your own take in international relations. And critical thinking will help you develop a new perspective or analyze the existing perspectives towards international relations itself. Because every different subject has its own take on what is relevant in international relations.
That's great. Shohan, actually, could you give us an example? I mean, could be from your own research. Just any example where you have had to engage with very different types of um, I don't even know what the word is, but let's say that you have to engage with,
Uh,
yeah, and
sure. So classically, if I'm thinking about it, basic history, United States and Soviet Union were the adversaries. US doesn't like Russia, Russia doesn't like US. But if you look at it from an astrophysics point of view, from space cooperation, you'll see that they have cooperated since 1970s. They have had a common space program. Now Russia and US jointly maintain International Space Station. And if you just look at international relations from the perspective of space or space exploration, it's completely different from your classic thinking that yes, US and Russia will never be together. So this kind of different perspective brings in different kinds of international relations outcomes. That's essentially what I'm talking about.
that's a great point. I mean, you're kind of saying that um, critical thinking in to be a good IR scholar is to see nuances at each of these different levels, and there's many levels that are all playing out at the same time with different histories altogether. So I think, right now what we've spoken about is, what critical thinking is. We've spoken about how it's useful, what its relationship with writing is, which is obviously an extremely important part of your undergraduate. You're going to be writing essays and papers throughout your time as an undergraduate. We've spoken a little bit about the relation, how critical thinking is important in at least 2 to 3 disciplines. So physics with Sanjana, environment with Siddharth, and um, IR with Shohan. But at the same time, we've also got a little bit of a taste of what these different disciplines are like in the first place, right? Unrelated to critical thinking. So just to let you know, we do have courses in all of these 3 different disciplines as well. We've got a really great course in environmental and sustainability, which is called Cities That Breathe. We've got, I love that name, Cities That Breathe. We've got a course in astrophysics called Stars, Stardust, and Us, which we're going to talk about in a bit more detail later. And we've also got a course in international relations called War, Peace, and Drones, which is about the changing nature of warfare with respect to changes in technology, which also we will talk about in a bit with Shohan. So now let's talk a little bit about a different course that we have. So we've got this new course that's coming up, which is called Crafting Your Story for Success. And the course is about finding your voice and figuring out how you can tell your story in a compelling way for multiple applications. One of them could be, for a college application. You want to convince an admissions officer that you bring something different to the table. The idea, however, of discovering a unique voice and telling a story in a way that resonates with your audience could be used in other such situations as well, such as on social media, or such as even when you're coming up with a pitch to, pitch your business, for example. You want to show that your business really brings something to the table. So Samira, firstly, could you introduce yourself, tell us about your background, and tell us about your college admissions journey, and we can take it from there.
Hi, I'm Samira. I am a psych major on entrepreneurship minor and creative writing concentration. I was born and brought up in Delhi and a hardcore ICSE student, which later became ISC. So my learning style has been very heavily rote learning, which Ashoka is absolutely not. But in terms of crafting my own college application and writing, I think it's so interesting because someone from a writing background, not to toot my own horn in any way, but someone that's just been involved in the writing process since a very, very young age, there's a certain myth that comes up that if you write well in general, you can write a college essay well. And I learned that the hard way. I absolutely couldn't. I would start somewhere and I would end up somewhere completely different because the way you write your college application is just a very tumultuous process. Because as a writer, you're kind of every sheet that you write upon is like a blank canvas, and the world is your oyster, and it's absolutely endless. You can write how much ever you want. But when you're writing a college essay, you're put into this box of 150 characters and you have to fit in 20 years of your life in that one little box. So that is a very intimidating challenge. But in order to ease that and to kind of dive into it and give a college admissions officer a reason to give you a shot at their university, you have to know yourself very, very well. And for me, what worked was speaking to the people that I know and love and the people that know me best to understand what my story is. You know, they would guide me. I would be able to converse with them openly and understand, is this relevant to me? No, I don't think they care about the fact that I got stitches when I was 7. And they kind of guide you a little bit here and there to figure out what makes you uniquely who you are and to be able to put that on paper in limited words. Because in college applications, you're reading so many different applications that you just want to keep it concise and short and to the point and just be as uniquely you as possible, essentially.
No, that's perfect. And I think like what you touched on is that it's not something that just comes automatically to you, regardless of what your previous writing experience is. You need some space to brainstorm and think. And you know the limitations that you spoke about of the college essay, like the 50, whatever, 200 words, etc. Those limitations are all over the place whenever we're trying to convey who we are. Um, in any context. So for example, if that's the elevator pitch, right? In entrepreneurship, you've got to keep it really short. Or a networking event among academics, when you're trying to get that assistant professor job, you got to keep it really crisp and short. So the art of communicating clearly, crisply, in a very concise and compelling way, that's what we're trying to create a space for with our course, Crafting a Story for Success. Okay, so now with all of this said, let's go on to actually contrast college level studies with high school education. I want to really get into that a bit more. So Aditya, can you tell us about how that works with physics?
Sure. So I actually did some JEE stuff in my high school physics. You also do chemistry and math, but let's talk about physics here right now. And the principal sort of difference that I find in between, say, high school physics and the physics you learn at college, or in a course like this, which is Star Stardust and us, is that so in college what you have is, I mean, I don't know, depending on the number of high schoolers that are doing physics here, S.C. Verma and all of those books, they have these pulleys and monkeys problems. You have different chapters: mechanics, optics, thermodynamics, and you sort of study them in a very block distinct way. Whereas you study like abstract, theory of different topics separately. And eventually, the difference at college level is, say, when so you study this in a very systematic way in high school. Then what you do is you invert the process. So in a course such as this course on astrophysics, or even generally at a college level, at some of the higher electives, what you do is you invert the way in such that you take a particular system, physical system that exists, say a star or a galaxy, and then you ask, okay, what all parts of these individual topics in physics that I have learned are applicable, are relevant in this physical system, and then you apply those relevant aspects to that physical system, and you derive your knowledge of it. You understand how it works, what are the mechanisms that power a star, how does a star die, how is it born. So all of these things, and how is the life of a star relevant and linked to the life of a galaxy, all of these things. So essentially the difference, as I said, is, instead of studying physics chapter wise in different blocks, you invert the approach. You take any sort of physically existent system and you see what all chapters that you've learned are applicable to it, and then you apply all of them in the relevant regimes, and then you sort of derive the physics of it. So that is the principal difference, in my opinion. How do you do physics at high school versus at college levels and in courses such as this?
Yeah, Aditya, tell us about the challenges of of doing the second thing? Like, what is particularly challenging about the
Right.
task that colleges set?
Right. So, as is evident, when you take any physical system, say a star, you you need to have your basics of what you've learned earlier very clear, because say you you should be very familiar with the ideas of mechanics and thermodynamics. A star is a hot ball of gas. Now, if you have not studied what expanding gas does in thermodynamics, then how will you know why is a star behaving the way it is? So these kinds of simple things. So you have studied you have studied gas laws and all of those things, how an expanding mass of gas behaves in a very sort of abstract context in thermodynamics. Now you see that actually happening in a star and various other kinds of things as well. There's pressure, this core is expanding, then nuclear reactions are happening. All of this is happening together in the core of the star, in the envelope of the outer sort of atmosphere of the star. So all of these things are happening together. Now you need to, as I said earlier, you need to have these individual abstract theory very clear, the foundation very clear, so that you're able to apply this to these complex physical systems and understand what is going on when two or more things are in tandem with each other. So that is the principal difficulty and sort of the increase of the learning curve that is there from high school to say university physics.
No, that's a great explanation. Along this general topic of these multiple things going on together in tandem, they're intersecting with each other. Um, I really also want Shohan to speak about that, but Shohan, we'll get to you in just a bit because I mean you were speaking about how that happens in IR a lot, right? But before we get to that, Sanjana, let's just dive a little bit deeper together into the particular course that we're offering. Um, so the course is called Stardust, and Us. And Sanjana, if you could just introduce us to the basic topic. And then I remember having this really great discussion with you where we were speaking about how this course brings together multiple different types of physics. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, so what I find unique in this course is, as Aditya already mentioned, just expanding on that, in high school, you're studying everything chapter wise, and you do not exactly know how, and to an extent, it's very detached from reality because you study these hypothetical systems and you don't know how real physics is applied. And if doing a course like this, or when you do an elective in college, and you have, all your physics knowledge coming together, you get a flavor of what real research looks like in physics. Because if you want to go into research, a lot of you, even in high school, you're interested to go into academia and research. To actually understand if you're interested in that or not, I think it's highly recommended to do a course like this. Because, for example, when you're studying this system, Stardust, and Us, this course will teach you about the processes that go on within a star and how the star evolves. The star also has a life cycle. It evolves. There's a birth and a death process. So you study all of that, and to study all of that, of course, mechanics, thermodynamics, optics, electromagnetism, nuclear physics, all of that come together. You need to know all of that. For example, in school, I did not really enjoy electromagnetism that much, but then again, I wanted to do astronomy and astrophysics. So once I started taking astronomy courses in college, I realized that how important it is as astronomy research. I had no idea about this in high school. That okay, these are the topics needed if you're even interested in astronomy, because through pop science or through science fiction, it's introduced in a very different way, and you don't know what physics knowledge is required to even get into this field. And another thing that happens is that once I started studying some of these topics in context, that I'm studying it in a system, I started understanding it better and started appreciating some of these topics more. So that is also something very important. That does not happen. That does not happen at all in high school, and also, the first 1 or 2 years of undergrad, when you are also studying these topics separately. Only once you start taking electives, especially an elective like this. So, like me and Aditya are also doing an elective that's very similar to this course, and it is probably one of the best courses this semester. Both of us can agree, because compared to other courses where also we're dealing with one particular topic, here, we have to, astrophysics is one of those areas of physics where you have to apply all of your physics, like our entire undergrad knowledge of physics is there. So it's very good. In our third year, we also get to know, okay, what are the weak areas, what are we more interested in, because now that we are planning to go into academia, it also helps us to understand where our interests lie or what are we not interested in, and that is also something very important that that helps you when you're applying for college, or if you're applying for graduate studies, as in the case of us.
Yes,
So
Sanjana, I think I do want to add one point that I hear the word application a lot in both of these examples. And I think that is essentially what all of you are perhaps trying to show, that while studying a concept in isolation is what happens at school. And I'm sure that there is a big reason behind that too. But it's when a high schooler understands the application and combines that with theory, I think studying whichever subject it is that they apply to at university level becomes that much easier. That's one step that they don't have to, or that's one leap that they don't have to take, because they already come with some sort of foundational understanding of the application of these concepts, which is why studying, say, for example, a subject like physics, which gets more and more complex as you study it, right? The first year from physics looks vastly different from the fifth year or the last year of physics. And then if somebody has to go in research, it's an entirely different ball game where application becomes key. So I think getting this foundation level understanding of bridging that gap between theory and practice through application, which is what students can do through the project modules that are built into these courses, will definitely give them a leg up than somebody, say, for example, who hasn't come with this kind of an understanding or an exposure. So yeah, I think that's something that I could
I'd just like
introduce.
to add one more thing, because Ankita mentioned, just going one step forward, and how that is very important. Because, say, in this case, coming back to the same thing, when you're applying all your knowledge, you also get used to thinking in a particular way. So now in my third year, me and Aditya, when we think of physical systems, we are not thinking of them in isolation. We're thinking of everything that's happening. So if we have, like two bodies, we're thinking of the mechanics of it. We also have thinking about the thermodynamics of it. That is also a kind of thinking that you need to get used to. When you're taking, courses in your first year or in high school, you don't get used to thinking that, because you do one chapter, it's done, you practice the questions, you know that from this chapter, these many questions are going to come. And you are not used to thinking in that particular way. So getting used to that way of thinking is also very important, especially if you want to continue in academia, or even if you do not want to continue in academia. If you want to go into industry, anything that's real, whenever you deal with a real world scenario, you have to think like this, because in real world, nothing happens in isolation.
that's totally right. Like the challenges the real world poses with you on you are not in the structure of an exam paper in your high school. So like you really do have to be a lot more creative when you deal with a real world situation. I think like regarding this question um of hands-on experimentation and kind of application as a way of understanding theory. Siddharth, can you speak a little bit about that with respect to economics? So that you had mentioned, you've spoken about environment before, but of course you're an econ major, and we are offering a course this time on game theory within economics. Um, I remember having this conversation with you on why game theory in particular is an interesting space to understand experimentation and theory together. So tell us about that.
So just continuing from where everyone's spoken about how application is used in the learning process. One interesting thing to me was thinking in the examination in itself. And game theory turned out to be this course where, unlike other courses where there is a certain structure, there is certain content that you learn, and within the frame of that content, you are asked questions maybe in different ways. But there is not much, say, and economics as a subject is pretty math heavy. So there will be only a certain level of math concepts that can come about in your paper. But when I was exposed to game theory for the first time, like despite being a good student all throughout school and first year of college, my first paper of game theory, I almost failed because I wasn't able to understand that a paper can be given like this, where it is purely thinking based during the examination. And the thinking is purely on a fundamental level that of how well you've understood the basic concepts of what even is a strategy, what will a player do in a certain strategic situation. Very basic things, but just knowing your basics right could have gotten you far ahead in that very examination than just having done as many sums as you could. So the fact that Horizons is providing a course on game theory is really interesting. And like if I were a high school student, then I would definitely recommend like anyone watching do that they do a game theory course, because it really opens up the way you think more than anything. And that's something I've really enjoyed as well. Because after almost failing that paper, I realized, okay, my learning is really blocked to some level, and I need to like unlearn a lot of things and relearn the way I'm learning itself. So that came into play a lot.
Yeah, and like the game theory course that we're offering this time, it has a lot of experimentation within it. So students will be put into groups, and they would actually be, with some knowledge of what each other is deciding to do, be asked to make decisions, and that's kind of what game theory is all about. But the point is that it's a very experiment-based course. That's kind of what a lot of the Sundays will look like once the concepts are introduced on Saturdays. Um, but Siddharth, when we were speaking, you were also speaking about how experimentation in general is this quite new thing that is pervasive at a lot of different economics courses. So even if you're not interested in game theory in particular, some familiarity with experimentation can help you prepare for an economics major with any sub-specialization, right? So Siddharth, can you tell us a little bit about how experimentation has featured in your journey as an econ student? And maybe you could give a particular example.
Yeah. Um, so statistics, as we know, is like a major part of economics as a whole. We've done it in school. We've done what mean, median mode is, standard deviation is, and those things are carried forward into college, but on a little higher level. But something interesting that came out was one of our courses, instead of just teaching us what these concepts were, said, okay, come up with a survey question yourself, survey all the students of Ashoka from all the way from first year to fourth year, collect all this data, and run all these formulae on the data you've collected, be it standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis. But more than all the formulae and math, I think our professors focused a lot on what is the English meaning of what you're deriving. Just knowing the English of what even you're researching about is so important. Um, because of doing your own project on, say, understanding the variation data in a particular field, the entire concept of a certain kind of, say, Z distribution just absolutely gets cleared up in your head, because you've done the work yourself, you've collected the data yourself, you've cleared it yourself, and applied the formula on it yourself. So that makes you actually remember what you've learned very well. And like, because you understand it, you tend not to forget it essentially.
Yeah. Another very interesting thing that you bring up, that doing such courses in different streams also exposes you to very specific vocabulary that is going to be used throughout your university level study of that subject. And once again, just like understanding the application of these concepts, to be familiar with this vocabulary or this world that you're stepping into will yet again make that path to university from high school a little smoother. Right. And that's something that I keep coming back to, and I keep drawing the attention back to the topic, because that's pretty much what we want to do for a lot of high schoolers in attendance today. That is, these are the kind of tips and tricks or the kind of strategies, like you mentioned, they can utilize in order to better prepare themselves for what university has in store. So the application process is a different thing that, like Paritosh mentioned, is something that we will address in our webinar next week. But when it comes to the actual study part of it, because you will be studying these subjects for at least 4 to 5 years after high school. So familiarizing yourself with a brand new set of vocabulary, what it means, will ensure that you're not completely lost and just trying to play catch up in your first year of university, right? So this will also give these students a leg up when they finally go into university and study these subjects. Very interesting. Thanks for bringing that up, Siddharth.
And exactly, and building off what you were saying, Ankita, it's one thing is vocabulary, which is in some way some type of concepts, but it's also skills. And I don't know if we have enough time to go into it, but Sanjana, Aditya, and I were discussing how, working a lot with data is something that you don't do that much in high school. But as a physics student, you're going to be given these data sets, or you're going to be creating these data sets, and you really need to begin to analyze that.
You're very right. In fact, Paritosh, that is something that perhaps you are also doing in psychology. You are actually utilizing a lot of data that you get from your studies. In fact, you're also doing it in IR. You are looking at some very specific statistics that happen between countries. I mean, this inference that Shohan spoke of, where the US and Russia have had collaboration specifically in space science. I mean, there has to be some relevant data worth researching and worth studying for them to come to that conclusion. And that I heard somewhere this very interesting saying that data has become the new oil. So anybody who has access to it, who can understand it, is now going to be at the forefront of whichever stream it is, being studied in. So very rightly, you said that understanding data, first of all, figuring out what is good data and what is bad data. How do you even make a complete data set is a very useful skill to have, which is something that we do explore in the course that we have on the fundamentals of data science, which is just as the name suggests, it gives you fundamental understanding of data science as a concept. But like you mentioned, I think a lot of this understanding and using of data is fairly interdisciplinary. It's also there, it also has a crucial role to play in, say, for example, political science. It has a crucial role to play in psychology as well. So I see that both Samira and Shohan agree with me. So
Yeah, I'd love to actually give the floor to Samira and Shohan. Samira, first with you. Let's talk a little bit about how this works out with psychology. So tell us about the differences between psychology at the college level and school level.
So psychology at the school level, especially as an ICSE student, you are learning XYZ and then you are asked XYZ. But when you come into college, cut to, like Siddharth and Sanjana have both mentioned, I studied like a certain kind of information, but my question was framed in a graph. And as a psych student, you're not expecting to see a graph with an axis and all of that, because that is not my background at all. I dropped math in the 9th grade. So as a psych major, it's just a big curveball that is thrown at you.
Yeah.
So psychology is very, very different in terms of its structure in college. There are just so many components that you have to take into account that will add up to your entire grade. Like currently, I'm studying a course in cognitive psychology, which is a very, very heavy course for me. There are several components that include an experimental practical design, wherein you're actually designing your own experiment and then conducting that on professors and teaching fellows. And just like has been covered in the webinar already, you have to know your data very, very well in order to even get the right results. Again, I think this ties it back down to critical thinking, because another thing school doesn't teach you is critical thinking, because you're taught to write and to think, but you aren't taught to write critically in order to think in terms of the conclusions that you'd like to derive. So when you come to college and you're studying a course like this, you have to be very, very well versed in what you are trying to obtain, because if you kind of mess up what variables you are identifying, what your hypothesis is, your entire conclusion can just go off the radar. So to have that clarity has been very, very important. And again, it differs from school in that way. Secondly, in terms of the content in school, again, is very, very rote learning based, but over here it's primarily application, not studying what it is, but actually what it means to you and how it can be interpreted by a student. So in these ways, it's just very, very variable from school.
How do you frame a hypothesis?
In order to frame a hypothesis, you have to first kind of understand what it is that you are trying to get. Like a hypothesis could be like almost like the conclusion you want. So when you frame the hypothesis, you're kind of including in it what you want in the end already. So you're giving it like a little bit of a trailer. You're giving your experiment a trailer, like this is my experiment and I'm going to do this. And then the steps that follow that actually make you prove that your hypothesis was true. Now, keep in mind that just because your hypothesis is XYZ does not mean that your conclusion is going to be parallel to what your hypothesis was. In my very first experiment that I had done in college, I had set out to find something, I'm forgetting, but when I did the experiment and I ran the statistical analysis online, I was completely wrong, and I think I scored pretty badly on that test. But yeah, just know that you should just be very clear and well versed in what you'd like to carry out in order for your conclusions to be in sync with where you had started off at the beginning.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's really helpful, Samira. I mean, I think the concept we're offering in psychology is called measuring the unmeasurable, and it's essentially like um if you have to measure the length of a table, you take out a ruler and you measure the length. It's pretty straightforward. But when you have to measure like a state of mind, like happiness or sadness, it becomes a lot more complicated. But we do have measures for these things, which are the basis of scales like the IQ scale or the World Happiness Index, right? And I think that along with helping you just bridge the gap between high school and college through a course like this, we're also trying to show you um, that the work ahead of you is quite exciting and very large. These systems of measurement are man-made, they're imperfect, they should be questioned and improved, and we want you to use your creativity to change them and then disrupt the norms that we have laid out for ourselves based on the imperfect systems that we have in place. So, just this whole section of discussion that we've had about bridging the gap between high school and college, as though like the purpose of these courses is just to help you succeed in college. The purpose of college itself is much larger than to succeed in college. The purpose of college is to make great change in a positive way in the world. So I just wanted to just lay that out there. Okay, so Shohan, let's go into some details now about the international relations course. Ankita, you were saying something.
Yeah, Paritosh, I think we are a little short on time. We do have another webinar that is scheduled for 12 o'clock. So at this point in time, Shohan, I'm really sorry to cut this short, but if we do have any questions at this point in time from the people in attendance, this would be a great time to share them either in chat, or you can raise your hand and we can definitely hear your question out. But just due to the paucity of time, we would like to have some questions come our way from the people who've been very patiently in attendance. And I'm pretty sure the fact that they have stayed with us this far shows that they're definitely interested in finding out how they can bridge the gap between high school and university. So if you have any questions for us, please write them in the chat or you can raise your hands. And while we do wait for questions, Shohan, I do want to understand from you one thing, that we do say that, I mean, political science and international relations is not just for those who want to make a career in it. A lot of these things that are happening around us have a definite impact on how we live our life. And just hold that thought. We have Aditi who's raised her hand. Let's hear her out, and then I'll come back to you. Yeah, yes, Aditi. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for conducting such an informative webinar. I have a question for Sohan. So I'm an IB student who takes global politics, and so because of the school ambience, I got very interested in international relations. But when I actually studied global politics in my class, I hated it so much. First, I had it at like higher level, and then I had to switch to like standard level. So yeah, so that makes me doubt whether I still want to pursue it or not. So if you know something about the IB curriculum and how they like teach it in the class, and if you could give me insights that, if you could assure me that it's gonna be very different at university and I can still pursue it.
Sorry, Aditi, but I'm not really aware of IB curriculum, but I share the fact that I also got interested into international relations from MUNs itself. And I can assure you that IR is not, like in classical sense, IR is not what is being taught at high school. High school doesn't even cover the basics of what actually IR is. You essentially study political science, and you study it in a manner like in a historical sense, that this happened, then this happened, in a very historical fact-based sense. And you are not asked to question the facts, like why you are said the state behaved in this way, but you are not asking why did the state behave in this way. So in IR, I would say that you make what IR is about. So if you don't think you don't like the political perspective in IR, you can come from any discipline, any background in IR and make IR your own discipline, your own way you approach IR. So I think in that way, IR is pretty accommodative towards every background that you come from.
Thank you so much. Actually, what I wanted to ask in particular was, so in my global politics class, what we do is we study that state did this, and then we just justify, okay, because realists say this and liberalists say this. So what we are doing is we're just justifying it from like two different perspectives, and we are doing nothing other than that.
Yeah, Aditi, I think Shohan has definitely answered the fact that it is definitely going to be a lot different in university level than it is in school for sure, simply because there are certain standard practices that are required as per each curriculum, be it IB, Cambridge, or CBSE for that matter. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for subjectivity, at least to be explored in classrooms. But IR as a subject is very, very nuanced, it's very complex. And it involves a lot of moving parts from different fields. So as far as your apprehension is concerned about whether studying this would be different from school, I think I can definitely tell you it will be 100%. You will be exposed to perspectives on a singular problem that you probably would not even have thought about. And that is not to say that it was not covered in the curriculum, but like I said, there are definitely layers to each concept and a lot of things that happen in IR. International relations or political science in general. Shohan, please nod if I am correct on this. All right, he is.
Thank you so
Okay, do
much.
we have, most welcome. Do we have any other questions? And guys, we only have time for one more and it has to be a short one. We do have our email ID in the chat. For any of you who have any questions, could be for our specific panelists, we'll ensure that the question reaches them so that we can get their perspectives also. And we will definitely write back to you. In any case, I just want to thank everybody, all the panelists who were part of this webinar with us. Your perspectives were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Siddharth, it would be great if you could just shoot us your question on the email ID that we have mentioned. Oh, sorry, Siddharth, you have raised your hand. You want to say
Yeah, I just
something?
wanted to take the question up in the chat box because I
Which
went through
was-
that same problem of the SRCC versus Ashoka problem. If I can take a minute to just answer that.
Sure, I don't see that in the chat, but go ahead.
The question is what is read out the question, Siddharth.
Yeah. What's your comparison between Ashoka and SRCC versus Stephen's LSR? So I myself was trying to get into SRCC. My best friend and I were preparing for CUET, and he got into SRCC and Ashoka, and I missed SRCC by 2 marks. So I landed up in Ashoka. And today we compare our journeys, and I can't tell you the stark difference that our journey, like our learning journeys, have had. And I compare it mainly on 3 things. One, the people we're surrounded with, the people we're learning from, and the infrastructure we have. Because SRCC has people purely coming from a commerce background versus Ashoka, where you're meeting people from at least 10 different streams, your association in college becomes so different, and your ability to think differently is just is supersedes that of any other college in while being at Ashoka. That's one thing. Second, people that you're learning from normal professors in an SRCC or any other DU college. But take entrepreneurship itself, which is business related things. Today, the CEO of a huge firm like running will come and teach you how to do business in a certain way. If you're learning the fundamentals of investing, the chairman of India's biggest private equity firm is coming and teaching us how you go about thinking about your investments. So that makes a huge difference in terms of, again, the connects you're making with these big people. And lastly, in terms of infrastructure, I don't think I have any doubt in saying that Ashoka probably has the best infrastructure university-wise in the entire country. And that itself makes a huge difference in the learning process. And even co-curricular wise, the kind of sports facilities we have and other co-curricular things happening on campus make a huge difference. So if you have the Ashoka versus SRCC debate in your head, please go for Ashoka.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Siddharth. Okay, we are all out of time right now. There's another webinar starting right now. So firstly, thank you to all the panelists. It was such a pleasure working with you, and I really hope we can work together again. And thank you everyone for coming and staying and asking these lovely questions. Our email's in the chat, so send us an email whenever you'd like. Check out the Horizons website. Our courses are all there. If you have questions about the courses, you can email us too. And hopefully we'll see you next weekend where we have 3 counselors and 2 or 3 alums from our previous Horizons courses who are going to talk about what Horizons can do for you. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.